Hey guys, welcome back to the Wild Courage podcast. Today, I find myself in beautiful Jackson Hole, Wyoming at the historic Diamond Cross Ranch. And my guest today is a lady that has been involved in my story for 25 years, 30 years.
Something.
Jane Golliher. Thanks so much for jumping on here with me today.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. So, Jane and I met in the mid 90s, 95, 96. I was working at a ranch around the corner from here to Triangle X.
That's right.
And we would haul our horses over here, and you had cows, and we would teach dudes how to team pin.
Yes.
And that's when we first met. And then I think it was the next summer is when you and Grant had gotten married, right?
I think so. And weren't you one of our first employees?
Yeah. And then the following summer, after I met you guys at the team penning, I came to work for you.
Yes.
I was so excited. I'll never forget. Grant called. I was working at a ranch in Arizona, and this was before cell phones, right? And I had a payphone outside my window, and that's the number that I had given you guys. And I remember I was laying in my bed, and the phone rang outside at the payphone. I ran out there, and it was Grant, and he offered me the job to come up that spring to work for you guys.
It's amazing. Many years ago.
Yeah.
So fast it went.
Yeah, like that was 1997, I think.
That sounds right.
I was so excited because I had come and watched one of Grant's clinics. And so I was so excited to come work for you guys because I really wanted to learn more about horsemanship and what you guys were doing up here at the ranch. And so I just remember being so excited to come over here and further my horsemanship. And you guys got married and Grant moved onto the ranch with you.
Mm-hmm.
But this ranch has been in your family since
the 40s. Mom and Dad put it together after World War II.
And did they get married first and move out here?
Yeah, Dad, he and his brother Emil bought 160 acres before he met Mom. And he was called into World War II where he was a medic. And then when he came back, Uncle Emil and his wife Elaine didn't like being so rural in this part of, Jackson Hole. So they sold their part to my dad. And Dad met Mom. Whoops, my headphones are coming off.
That's okay.
Excuse me. Should I start over with that?
No, it's okay.
So anyway, then he met my mom, I believe in 1945 at a dance at Moose, Wyoming.
Oh, wow. So your dad was already out here and had the property.
Yes.
And your mom was she traveling through, like visiting Jackson Hole?
Well, she had come with the two Craighead women. Their husband were grizzly bear specialists. They were twins, both the boys. And the girls and Mom had come here, and Mom got a job in Moose in the post office. But somehow they met at a dance, as far as I know, at Moose. And they were married, I believe, the following fall. And then, so she was transported from where she grew up in Chicago to very rural Jackson Hole, which, when they came, they ran on a generator. They didn't even have power.
Wow.
And the highways that we see weren't here. So it was, if we think it's rural today, it was very rural.
So did your dad have a cabin on the property here?
I'm pretty sure they did.
Before they got married, was he living on the ranch?
As far as I know, yes, he was. Uh-huh.
So then they got married and she moved from Moose out to Moran?
Yes.
So how far are we from Jackson, just so that people know like how rural this is even today?
35 miles. We live 35 miles from Jackson. And when they got married, the road that you and I traveled to go to Jackson wasn't there. They had to take the back route by the Tetons to even get here, like the scenic route that we take.
Oh, wow. So it was even a lot further.
Yeah, it was a lot further. And I don't think they hardly even went to town in the winter months.
Yeah, you probably couldn't.
Yeah, you probably could, but you seldom did,
And what were they doing to make a living in those days here?
Well, as far as I know, Dad always started cattle ranching. So I believe when he got home, I don't know how he purchased the cattle, but his vision was always to have cattle. And maybe Emil had taken care of that while Dad was away. And over time, what he and Mom did together is went to the bank a lot. The bankers were friendly in those days.
Right. Handshake deals.
And so over a period of probably, even when we were growing up, they were still paying for the ranch, but they managed to put together 3 homestead-sized pieces, each homestead being 160 acres.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
I mean, that just is
amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Because the winters are so incredibly harsh here.
They are.
And the growing season to grow hay to feed those cows, you get 1 cutting here.
That's right.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to have the vision to like add more to, the risk was just unbelievable.
Right.
To go for it. And so were all the pieces of land put together continuously?
Yes, the one we're sitting on, this piece was called Andes that you and I are sitting on today. And so then where the main houses are across the highway, I believe that's where Mom and Dad, the first houses were. And then there's another piece right next door. So then it goes right to what was once my Uncle Ed's and on across the highway that Ed added later. So he and Dad, I mean, really, they did amazing things before Jackson Hole became Jackson Hole.
Sure. I mean, they owned a big chunk of this valley.
Did. Yes, they
Valley.
did. Yeah, totally.
And cows was their main source of it. That's how they made a go at, was peddling grass.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like, they didn't, my Uncle Emil had a hunting camp, but for Dad and Ed, it was all the cow business, which to me is amazing because you've been in the cow business. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it takes a big dive.
Yeah, and have one hard winter and run out of hay.
Exactly.
I mean, do you know where they would go to sell their calves in the fall? Where would they take them? Would they go to DuBois or would they go to Jackson? Do you know?
I would think, like during the years that my sisters and I grew up that I recall, a lot of times in the summer, buyers would come from Iowa.
Oh, really?
For either to buy calves or yearlings, whatever they would be selling. And then they would ship them in the fall. And we ran mother cows. We ran pairs. So we would calve in the spring, run on the range in the summer.
Up in the mountains?
Up in the forest. And then the cattle would come down. And on some of the cattle, we would sell calves. And some of the cattle we kept yearlings, just depending what the permits allowed.
Wow. I mean, just what an undertaking even to get your calves to market, because if they're going to Iowa, I mean, they're going to put them on a train somewhere. So maybe Driggs, I guess, or DuBois was, I don't even think there's a train in DuBois, is there?
No. If I recall, most of the buyers being from Iowa, I think they went east.
So they'd trail them over the Togety or something?
I don't think so. I mean, and like going way back, I don't really know beyond when the girls and I grew up. When we grew up, trucks came like the big semis. They might have been old-fashioned, but still they were shipped out.
And you guys would ship out of here.
Yes.
How long were your folks married before they started? This is what's so cool about your story. Before I ever even met you, you and your sisters are legendary in this community because your dad, Walt, had 4 daughters.
Right.
And you guys worked this land and worked this ranch, and everyone was like, those 4 girls can outwork 4 men all day long because you just grew up doing all the things, irrigating and haying and taking care of the cows in the summer and riding and breaking horses and doing all the things that a dad needs sons to do. And he had 4 daughters and you guys did all of it. So how old was your folks when they started having kids? Pretty early on in their marriage?
No, it was like, I think, they of course thought they would have children right away. And it was like, I believe 5 years. And maybe Mom didn't even think they were going to get any. And then all of a sudden when we started coming, we were really close together. So like the first 3 of us are like each 15 months apart.
Oh, back to back.
Yeah. And then my youngest sister, Joanne, is 3 years younger than Chris. So we all grew up in a huddle, so to speak.
And did you grew up across the street, right?
Yes.
At the home place?
Yes.
In the house that I would call Grandma Betty's house? Is that where you guys grew up in?
Well, if you look at the back, the little log part of it, that's what we grew up in till we were about 14 years old. And then a real good carpenter built the front, which is really neat.
So all 6 of you were in that little
that little house.
I mean, like what, 800, 800 square
two
feet?
little bedrooms.
Dang. And that's
Yeah.
for long winters.
For sure.
You
It
guys
was
were
just a way of life.
Yeah, you didn't know any different.
No, it was great.
Did you go to school in Grand Junction?
Through 8th grade. When I went to school, everybody went through the 8th grade, and then we went to high school in Jackson.
Wow, that's a long drive
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, bus rides.
So what was your summers like growing up that you remember just working on the ranch?
No, there was lots of opportunities here. I mean, we had a great life working on the ranch because, like you said, we did all parts with Dad as his daughters. And I always wanted a brother. But looking back, I'm really glad I didn't have one because we probably all wouldn't have got to help Dad as much as we did. So we helped, and we went to school because Dad considered education very important because he only got to go to 8th grade.
Oh, really?
So academics were important to my parents, and we had a good little school, so we got a really good rural education. But let's come back to my question. I don't want to drift away from it.
In the summers, what was your summers like growing up?
So when we were young, we would all go riding with Dad during the day, like up on the range, all 4 of us, because Mom was plenty busy. She fed the hay hands. She fed my Uncle Pete lived next door. He lived with us a good part of the year. So out we went. Plus, we had neighbors usually. And so we all had horses and we all rode, and it was a great life.
And helped each other, right? Everybody helped the neighbors.
Yeah, it was a great neighborhood.
Brandon cows is big deal to help everyone.
Yeah, it was very rural, very ranchy.
Now, guest ranches and tourism was, when you were growing up, was already pretty prevalent in this valley, right? I mean, even back into the 20s and 30s, people were coming here to stay at guest ranches. So were you ever tempted to go work over there, or you just were super happy to work for your dad in the summers and work on the ranch?
I had, being the oldest, I think I was always looking forward, but I worked at the Hatchet Motel just up the road.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, during my teen years. So I waitressed and cleaned cabins and did dishes, and I loved it. So I would do that, part-time, and then we'd hay and, so kind of depending how old we were, what we did. Like before I could work, we ran the scatter rake during haying and help with the haying. And then when I went to the work for the Hatchet, during my off time, I would come and, run the tractor to put up the hay. So, and we all kind of did different things. Like Marty and I tend to work, that's my second sister.
Okay.
We tend to work off the ranch a little more. And I'd say Chris and Joanne, my 2 younger sisters, worked on the ranch more, but all kind of in the same vein.
Sure.
And we were in 4-H with 4-H steers all of our, years that we could be in 4-H was very good to us.
Oh, wow. It's cool to hear all these stories because I see how that's played out in your boys, not to get ahead of ourselves, but those same things, education, 4-H.
Yeah, good point.
Was very important to you, which is evident in your sons. But so what were your aspirations after high school?
Well, I went to college. I think I went to college because at that time, our parents felt that we should have an education. And one thing I really respect about my dad's parents, Dad is one of 10 children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 6 of them are girls. And his parents homesteaded about 10 miles away, which is now the Yellowstone National Park.
I didn't know your dad grew up here.
Well, not here, but 10,
But I mean in the valley.
Yes, he did, just 10 miles away. Isn't that neat? Yeah.
So you're 3rd generation.
Yes, that's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I did not know that. With 10 kids.
10 kids. So the neat thing about his parents, who came from Switzerland, and because there was no opportunity there, so they managed to get here, this Jackson Hole reminded his dad of Switzerland. He had been a climber. Yeah. But what they realized, I think is so far-sighted, is they wanted their girls to have an education so they just could have a skill. So the boys went through 8th grade, and that's as far as they got to go because there was no, way to go to high school. And the girls lived with relatives on the other side of the mountain in Driggs and all went to high school. And most of them are all professional women.
Wow. And
isn't
that's really forward thinking, because
forward thinking, totally.
I think it was somewhat rare for women to even really go to college back then, right?
Well, it
and
wasn't,
to pursue
right.
education, because your job was to have kids and cook and clean. And how progressive.
I know. I'm just proud of them.
Your grandparents were off the boat.
I think they were. I mean, I
they
think
came
it's
from
totally
Switzerland,
amazing.
and then home came straight here because it looked like home.
Exactly.
With new opportunities in America.
Yes.
And the mountains, and he was a mountain climber.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the courage that it took to take your wife, at least, even if they didn't have kids yet, and be like, let's go to a foreign land and set up shop? And back in those days, I mean, it's so hard to scratch out a living because the winters are so unbearable here.
Well, exactly. And Grandma and Grandpa came with 2 children, and I think she had another child on the way when they moved to however they got their little house built. And I think she had the baby in the fall, in September, and then Grandpa went to Driggs to get the windows. So and by the time he got back, she'd burned all the firewood to keep the kids warm.
Wow.
So,
did you know your grandparents?
Not well. I never knew my grandpa.
He died?
He died when I was real little. And I have pictures of my grandma, but she had moved, when Grandpa died, she moved to Utah and married someone that she had known when she was young. So we seldom saw her. And I never knew my grandfather.
But aunts and uncles, all of you knew all them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have lots of cousins.
Yeah, most of the cousins are like a little bit older than my sisters and I. So we're kind of laggers in the family. We didn't go to high school together. They were all
gone,
just a little bit more down the road.
So where did you go to UW?
I did.
How was that a big culture shock, going to Laramie from living in Moran, Wyoming your whole life?
It was. And so I went to Laramie during the Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what part of Vietnam was, but I can only say if my parents had known what college was like when I went,
they wouldn't have sent you.
They would not have sent me. It was totally a culture shock. All of a sudden, drugs are prevalent. Free sex is prevalent. Very liberal thinking is prevalent in our colleges. And there's total commotion throughout the United States.
Well, in that era, right, the late 60s, early 70s of that Vietnam time, like people were starting to push back against the government and like this, all this new thinking and anti this and that, which I can't imagine growing up in this peaceful little valley. Like, what in the world have I gotten myself into? Did you graduate? Did you go to 4 years?
I did. So that's another thing. And I think how unprepared I was, because our 4-H steers and working paid for our education. My parents, they would help in any way they could, and they offered to help more. But we felt good that we could do that.
Right.
So I got a degree in physical education, which I never used. I just couldn't think what else to major in. And looking back, of course, I would have majored in business, because all my life I've kind of been an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I would consider it, I'm not sorry I went, but kind of a waste of 4 years.
Yeah. I think a lot of people recognize that, especially like my daughter went to school for 4 years and now she has hundreds of $1,000s of debt and can't even get a job without going to graduate school to get in more debt, to get a job it's really a mess. But anyway, did you come back in the summers when you were in college and work at the Hatchet?
Yeah, we came back, and I know we worked, like Marty and I one summer worked at Togety Lodge, pretty much at Moran. We just worked all over. Marty worked at Jackson Lake Lodge. I did not, but there was always lots of work.
Did she go to college? Did you guys go together?
Yeah, Marty was a year after me. She went. Chris came for like 2 or 3 years. Chris was an art major. That's my third sister. She's very artistic. Well, we all are, but Chris was smart enough just to say, bag it, And I think she quit her 3rd year, which they would have preferred she finish.
Sure.
And Joanne, my youngest sister, went to Powell for a couple years, or maybe not even that long. She decided she didn't like it and she quit. And I very much respect her decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd come home in the summers, and then once you graduated from college, how long till you met Richard after college?
Let's see, I think maybe I was 22. Oh, that's what I did in the summers. This was so fun. I worked at the post office and ran post office part-time during my, I might even started in my high school years through college. In the summer, it was a great job. I made a really good income for a kid, but I didn't want to work for the federal government the rest of my life. So I met Dick when I was working at the post office, and he had got a job with the Hansons, Meads, etc., bringing cattle all the way to the elk ranch, which is it's at Moran.
Yeah.
And so that's where I met him. And I think we were married. Well, we were married when I was 23 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He was a cowboy.
Yeah.
Very handsome guy.
Yeah.
I met him much later, obviously, in life, but I totally remember him when he was at the JY. But,
oh yeah, the JY. That's right.
Yeah. So you guys got married pretty young.
Yeah.
Like not too long after college.
Right.
And then where did you guys live?
Well, we lived at I love the elk ranch. I would have done that all my life. I love that job so much. But so the 6 months at the elk ranch, we had work. And then we had 6 months where we kind of hunted a job. So sometimes once we went to Idaho and he worked at a feedlot, and we calved for Hanson's in the spring. And then we got offered a job at the JY Ranch, which is owned by Lawrence Rockefeller. Mary Mead, one of the Hansons, recommended us. So we got a job at the JY, which is Lawrence and Mary Rockefeller's private retreat ranch.
And was that year round?
Yes, that was year round.
So that probably felt nice to have some stability of a year-round job. No, you preferred the...
I really love, at that age, you don't think, like, I just always liked the ranch thing and always, of course, felt it would work out. I mean, It wasn't far-sighted. I just loved it. And I just felt I was much too young to have to quit that.
And settle down to a year-round job where you shoveled roofs
in the
all
snow,
winter.
yes.
Yeah. How long were you at the JY before you had Luke? Or is that where you even had Luke?
Yeah, I had Luke. Luke was born in 81, and I was there. And then Peter was born in 84, and I was there.
So you were... How long do you say that you think you were at the JY?
I think I was there for 12 years. And
wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Quite a long time.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were there that long.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth noting how special that place was.
Yes.
So the Rockefellers, John D. Jr. bought all the land back in the 30s and 40s that is now Grand Teton National Park. And he kept, I don't know how many acres was the JY, 500, 1,000?
It was 2,000 originally, but then he gave more to the park.
Yeah.
And kept very little, really.
But yeah, but he kept that kind of right on the south edge of Grand Teton National Park for their family retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on the southeastern end of Phelps Lake, right at the base of the Grand Tetons, just to try to give a visual of how incredible this place was. I, years later, went on to work for Tom and Bobby Laughlin there, but just to let people know how incredibly beautiful, it's surreal, that place. Mm-hmm. Like when I think about looking out the window of the Cook house, eating breakfast there every morning, looking across Phelps Lake, it was really a magical, beautiful place. And I didn't realize that you spent that much time there.
Yeah, quite a few years.
Yeah, that's amazing. And managing that place, and were you you worked there also?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we took the job, I asked to be, I didn't want to have to answer the telephone day and night and day all year long. So I asked to be on a minimal salary, which wasn't very smart because I ended up helping a lot. Like
doing more.
Yeah, like we did all the opening, the cleaning, but to my joy to get to do that. I love working.
Yeah. So you were there for 12 years. And so the boys grew up there.
Yeah, they sure did. Mm-hmm.
And then things didn't work out with that marriage.
Correct.
While you were there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so you and the boys, where did you guys go?
Well, what we did is we went back to Moran, to the ranch, to the main place. And, of course, we have the main house, and then we had the house that burned down. We'll come back to that later. And then we had the bunkhouse. And the boys and I went to the house that was my mom and dad's that happened to be available. And so that's where we were, which was a good place to be, cousins, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, very
Safe.
Yes.
Yeah. And your dad was alive then?
Yes, he
right?
was. Uh-huh.
What year did your dad die?
Okay, let's see. He was 80. He was born in 1912. We'll figure that one out.
Yeah, I guess it's not that relevant, but because I met your father
Okay.
in the early 90s.
So did he still know you then?
I just met him
Okay.
because our horses would swim the river in the fall
Okay.
at Heart 6 and come over and get on your guys' property. And so he would call Cameron Garnick,
Yeah.
and Cameron would send us over and we'd swim across the river and
Get him.
come up, and they'd be around your barn and stuff, and we'd chase him back, and he'd be like, build better fence or something,
Yeah.
But I just remember meeting him a few times in that time. So that was in the 93, 94. So he was still alive then.
Yeah. What happened to Dad was he got a staph infection in his shoulder, almost died. And he did live through that. But after that, he had symptoms of Alzheimer's, which got progressively worse over time. So he had 7 years of, I would just call it, if there's such a thing, sheer hell on earth.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, it was really hard on my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because essentially you're with somebody that
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same person
No,
that they were.
not at all.
It really is a thief, that disease.
It is.
So you and Luke and Pete moved back to the home place, and families there. What a nice, safe place for you guys to land after any divorce is rough or separation.
Right.
And I know, obviously, growing up in plenty of divorces in between my mom and dad. And would the boys go there and because he kept the job at the JY?
He was at the JY. I'm trying to think how much longer he was there after I was gone. We'd have to ask the boys that.
Well, a long time, because he was there when I came to this valley.
Okay, he was. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I had friends that I'd meet at the rodeo that worked for him at the JY.
Yeah.
And so I kind of knew who he was just from them. And again, that was in the early 90s, mid 90s. So he was there for a long time.
Yeah, I'm thinking that he lost that job about when I'm thinking Luke was like in 7th grade, something like that.
Yeah.
And moved back to California at that time.
Oh, that's right. He left the valley after that.
Yeah.
And then how long did you guys stay at the ranch?
Well, off and on, the ranch was always home. But what I ended up doing was in church, I reconnected with a young man that I had gone to school with, and we were married. So we moved down south of town, the boys and I, and that didn't last too long. And so then we ended up divorced and came back to the ranch, like maybe 3 years later, something like that. And then the ranch became home to us.
And you really haven't left since then?
Well, I'm gone now, 25 years with Grant.
Yeah. But I mean, you've stayed on the ranch since that time. Except for Pavilion in the winter.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. So after your second husband, and the boys were old enough to savvy what's going on, probably. As a mom, I would imagine that that's probably hard to move your boys into another situation and that not pan out, and then have to take them back out of that situation. That was probably hard on your mama's heart.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, I think especially I'm a believer, so I'm not a big believer in divorce. And so here I am divorced 2 times. And then I think one thing, if I would say to anyone, it would be, find out what your judgments are. Because I started at that time going, maybe it's not the men in my life. Maybe it's me. And so I began praying, okay, Lord. So I asked the Lord to send me somebody to help me to find out, because I just figured I'm not ever getting remarried, because obviously I would just recycle, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so
that's what happens.
That's what happened. So I asked the Lord to send me someone. And when somebody came, I looked to see if it was them. No. Would you be it? No. And so one day, the good things that happened to me during that time, I was a part of a really strong women's prayer group. And it was like 5 of us. And we met weekly all year long. And we were tough on each other, but we really lived in the supernatural, in as much as possible. And one day, one of my friends called me and she said, "Hey, there's this lady here. She does inner healing." And I said, "I need to come see her." So that morning I went and saw her. Her name was Janicini.
Who I've met.
She's awesome.
Yep.
And so she began to tell me, she operated a lot in the supernatural by just having little pictures for you that helped you. She didn't know, but you did.
Yeah.
But what she called into my life was dreams. So I began keeping a dream journal. And when I couldn't interpret them, I would call Janice. We didn't bother all the time because she's busy. But the Lord began to unwind for me. And what the scripture that he brought me to is, the judgments you mete out will be met back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Now, I think it could be good. But in my case, it was bad. And so what I realized, thanks to Janice and spent years off and on with her, is that if I had to repent of judging my dad, who was a very good dad, but he wasn't that nice to my mother. And so as I grew up, I remember thinking, I will never marry anybody like my dad. I'll never be treated like my dad. Even though he was a great dad, I just didn't like how he treated Mom.
He modeled marriage in a way that didn't feel safe to you.
It just didn't feel healthy.
Yeah.
Now, he wasn't never physically mean, nothing like that. That was just hard. I mean, they had a lot going on. But as kids, you try to figure it out.
Right.
And so once I learned that and repented of it, because that's all we have to do. It's like Janice explained it as a legal contract. So if I have a legal contract, somehow I have to break that contract, or it's going to, it has right hold on me. So I learned as a believer that I put that under the name and the authority of Jesus, and I put it under the blood of Jesus, and I break my agreement with that contract. And that breaks the enemy's power to use that over me anymore. So that brought lasting change, and then dreams. And I mean, it was years of work, but it changed everything.
That's amazing. I just want to circle back to this spot right here, because this is so powerful. Something that me and my friends do that is so important, and I would encourage people to do, is you found a group of sisters that would watch your blind spot and had permission and authority to speak to your blind spot. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. We were brutal.
This is what I've learned in this space. It's super hard. It's super hard to go to your brother or sister and be like, I don't think you recognize and see what you're doing, but these are some of the things you're doing that I don't think you know. And it's a detriment to you and those of us in your life. That is wild courage. That's the epitome of having the courage to go tell your friend who you say you love some very hard truths.
For sure.
But out of that, look at the fruit.
Yeah.
It's the awareness of, I also love that you said that you recognize that you didn't play the victim. You're like, wait a second, there's a cycle going on here. Maybe I own a part of it, which is also, in Mary and I's story, so very important. That's what saved our marriage, was like, oh, it's not the other person's fault. Maybe I need to look inside myself to see what I'm bringing to the table. So you had people that you let speak into your life, into your blind spots, and hold you accountable. And you also had the self-awareness to be like, maybe some of the dysfunction in my marriage I'm bringing to the table. And you went and sought inner healing.
Yep.
And surrounded yourself and humbled yourself with people that maybe were further down the road in you in some areas. And it sounds like in some spiritual areas you sought people that have fought for something and have authority in something that mentored you.
Absolutely.
And helped you interpret dreams and visions. And that's powerful. Because if you would have missed either two of those steps, who knows where you would be right now?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know where I would be. I don't know where my children would be. If I dared to recycle, I probably just would have recycled into another bad marriage and thought it was somebody else's fault.
That's what happens. That's so, but it's humility. That's one of our core values at Wild Courage is humility, right? Yeah. Because if you didn't have humility to look inside your own story and your own self to say, maybe I'm bringing some of this to the table. You just recycle the same. That's why people get married 5 times. Exactly.
Same person over again.
And they become bitter and become more of a victim and blame everybody else. So, wow, that's powerful, Jane. Thanks for sharing that with us. So in that process, you're raising Peter and Luke and doing the best you know how to go on your own journey of healing. And doing the best you can to be a single mom. Fortunately, like you said, you have brothers-in-laws and sisters, and they have cousins to kind of grow up with. Also very involved with 4-H and learning responsibility. And obviously, school and education was passed down to you, and you made that a priority in your boys' lives as well. And then comes Grant. How did that all go down?
Sometime later.
Yeah. Years later, right?
Yeah, years later.
How long were you on your journey of going inside yourself and getting healing, the inner healing, and going on the spiritual journey before you met Grant? How long was that time frame?
Well, I would say, I don't really know the timing, but I would say there's probably, because my prayer group we stuck together for so many years before Grant. God just kept working that in our lives. So it wasn't all like in the summer we all worked, but in the winter we all prayed together. So I would say a good 5 years, but it's not like constant day in, day out. You read the Bible and the Lord shows you something and, or a dream shows you something that for me, it's just put it under the blood of Jesus and repent of it and ask him to break all the power of it. Yeah. And he does. It's so simple.
And it's a journey. Like it's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm healed. I'm better. I can look for a relationship. Like this is what we talk about all the time is like, we're all in process. We're still in process. We're still growing, right? Yeah. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like you don't arrive at this thing.
No.
And so you just keep going and putting strings of better days together. And you get healthier and made more whole and more set free.
Yes.
Is that what you found to be true too?
Yeah. And I think one thing that I did find as I went along is, I can more quickly determine, male or female unhealthiness. And I wouldn't be drawn to that anymore because that wasn't me and they weren't bad people. That was just who I was, but I wasn't that person anymore.
Yeah, it's important to recognize that because they aren't a bad person.
No.
We're just at different places in our journey.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
No judgment.
No.
Just sometimes when you're in the journey at different places, you need to surround yourself with different people.
Absolutely.
To get through some of the hard times and through the inner healing. And so, that's also very important.
I think who we surround ourselves with will determine our destiny.
I love that quote that says, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, I believe
it's true.
Yeah.
And the healthier you get, you attract healthier people too.
Yeah.
Like I look around at the tribe of men that I run with.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. They're so powerful and so amazing, so healthy and so humble and so quick to pick you up.
Yeah.
And surround you. And man, back in the day, we would all just be in the same brokenness and drive each other to the bar.
Well, that one thing I want to say about you, Jeremy, is ever since you were young, you had destiny written all over you.
Thanks for calling that out in me.
It might have taken a little while, but it was so obvious.
It did take a while.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the journey.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So you're on this journey of to wholeness, we'll call it.
Okay.
Because that to me is mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. That's the whole package.
Right.
And along that, wasn't there a dream that you had? Or maybe it was Grant had a dream about you.
Let's see. Yeah, Grant had the dream, which he didn't. Well, first of all, coming back to Grant, like he and his first wife, we were all friends because they were horse people.
Right.
So Grant wasn't just a sudden acquaintance. I knew he and Lockie. And so, as a thinking they would be a very happy couple all their life and their daughter Tara. And so, but let's see, he had a dream after that. So I get a call from his wife one day, who we were quite close. And she told me she was divorcing Grant. And I said, like, Lockie, what's the matter with you? You're just going to marry somebody just like Grant again, and you have a wonderful husband and a beautiful daughter. So why would you do that? No, she had some grave excuse, which later I found out she was involved with the fiddler in the band.
Right.
But so Grant went back to Colorado, and we did not really I don't think we kept in touch at all that winter when he was in Colorado, but I did bring him back to Jackson Hole to put a clinic on the following spring, and which was very successful. And then Tara was here with her mom in Du Bois, so he had nothing great going in Colorado, so he just spent the summer here and lived in our bunkhouse. And so we just kind of started dating, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And here you are.
Yeah. And the good thing for Grant and I really was, I'll come back to his dream, but we have always had, and it's what cemented our marriage, a really, united walk in the Spirit,
Yeah. And that's
been the glue that's held it
from
together.
the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I came to work for you right after you guys got married.
Yes.
And it was like company policy, if you will. We had breakfast and did Proverbs and prayed.
Right. Yeah.
Every single morning.
Yes, we did.
Every single morning.
Yeah.
And in that time in my life, not to get into my story a whole bunch, but just in honoring you and Grant in this part of your journey, I was on the run from what I did not know yet, right?
Yes, exactly.
I didn't know what I was running from, but the horse thing was really what I was attracted to as coming to learn, because I went to that clinic that you brought Grant here.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
And that's where I was like, I need to learn what this man knows.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the church, was on the run for a decade when I met you guys. And you guys started reintroducing me to a walk with the Father in a very non-judgmental way that I trace back to the beginning of the journey that I've been on for 20-some years.
That's awesome.
And so the fact that you and Grant bathed your marriage in that, I attribute very much to where I'm at today and how God put me with you guys. And here we are 20, however many years later. Like, it's just a beautiful, redemptive story of what you and Grant have built.
Well, we're very honored. We feel God doesn't just send us people, he sends us people with purpose. And so you have to, we just have to say, Lord, is this someone you sent, or is it a distraction? We all have to act, you were sent with destiny, but we have had to really guard ourselves again, as there's a lot of people come through your path and they will do nothing but waste your time.
Yeah.
And they have no interest in changing.
Yeah. Were you apprehensive at all marrying Grant for your boy's sake?
Well, because I'd been married before, already failed the marriage, but I'd been single for 7 years after that. But obviously, I'm going to look at my children. But the fact that we knew it was going to be tough. Luke, I think, was in 7th grade, and Peter's, he might have been a freshman in high school.
I think he was a freshman.
Was he? Okay, and Peter's 3 years younger. So I think what we said was the good part is we both had children. So we both had skin in the game.
Right.
One couldn't leave because the other had bad kids.
Mm.
But yeah, obviously the boys, when we told them we were getting married, which was the worst possible place we could announce it, we're at a sale group and the kids are there and Grant goes, "Oh, by the way, Jane and I are getting married this fall." And of course, Peter burst into tears.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't very good judgment. I mean, we've made a lot of mistakes. That's
a conversation that you probably needed to sit down with them,
the boys.
Just the three of you.
Yes, absolutely.
And to hear it
from us.
That was
bad
hard.
Taste. Yes.
Yeah. So that was probably felt a little bit risky bringing Grant.
Totally.
Because now you're not moving to somebody else. You're inviting him into
our house.
Their house.
Yes, exactly.
Your house. You and the boys' safe place.
Yes.
Your refuge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was probably hard on everyone.
Yeah.
Well, on the boys anyway. And you, for some extent.
Well, one thing, I was thinking of the order that God does things, and we didn't talk about this, but this cabin that the boys and I lived in burnt down. Like, I don't remember, the exact timing. But
so in that 7 years when you were single.
Well, exactly. So we lived in Joseph and Brad's house for the winter, and we floated around.
So you lost everything?
Well, not everything. Some things were kept, like the boys' football cards. They were important to them, but we lost the house and we lost the home. But what I'm trying to come to is, if that hadn't happened, as a result of that happening and that house being lost, this little house, then we were able to get a house at Jeffrey City, which had been one of the oil workers' houses, and remodel it, which is the house that's there today.
So you moved it?
Yes.
Oh.
So by the time Grant and I got married, we had enough space for all the kids, which if the house hadn't burned down,
it wouldn't have worked.
No, it wouldn't have worked. And so, sometimes when bad things happen, we just don't
things,
see down the road.
Right.
Yes.
You can use all things.
Yeah.
So you have the space, you get married. And I know just because Grant's been on here, that was a rough transition for him moving in. Yeah. And the boys didn't welcome him with open arms because they've seen this movie already before.
Exactly.
They've been down this road.
Mm-hmm.
And it was different probably with him moving into their space versus you guys trying to move into his.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably felt very threatening to them, I would imagine. And I love how things has turned out and how it took time. And I feel like, again, just talking to Grant from his perspective, it was hard because he wanted to put his best foot forward with them, but they'd been hurt by this situation already a little bit. So that was probably a lot for you to handle, being in this new love of your life, Christ at the center, knowing that this is going to be different this time, but also the tension of, this is hurting my boys.
Right.
And that's a lot of tension to live in.
Yeah, it was. And because we both had kids, I think that was the goodness of it, is that we both had a reason to succeed. For me, there was no looking back, and I know it was difficult for Grant, but I think even looking at Tara, to have jumped out of one more relationship would have been the very worst thing for her.
Did she move in with you guys too?
She was with us all winter in the winter months. Grant got custody of Tara.
Oh, okay.
So she saw her mother on the weekends and always rode with her. Mom was an amazing horseman. Yeah. But really, Tara lived with us. And that was a good thing. It really was. It was hard, but it was good.
And her and the boys seemingly got along well, right?
The longer they went, the better they did. She and Peter did school, like they drove to school together. Luke was older, so he's a little older than Tara. But Peter and Tara are good buddies.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's about the time that I started working for you. I really, because Luke was older, he and I, he kind of gravitated towards me a little bit because we were closer in age.
Yeah.
And he was playing football. And I remember I'd play catch with him in the pasture behind the house by the barn and talk about life. And he and I became very close.
Absolutely.
And have always stayed close to this day.
For sure.
So that always meant a lot to me. His brotherhood. I felt like an older brother to him a little bit.
You were. Or you probably still are.
Yeah. Yeah. He's amazing. So I do want to touch a little bit on your two sons. We grew up in the middle of nowhere. Till 8th grade, went to a little tiny school in Moran, Wyoming, went to high school in Jackson Hole, and went on to amazing, incredible things and still are.
Right.
How did that happen? So Luke, the oldest one, went to Harvard. How did you go from Buffalo Valley, Wyoming to Harvard?
Luke has lived light years ahead of himself all his life. He's always seen out there somewhere. So even when now part of what we did, during our junior high years is the kids were in Christian school, and they were in and out of Christian school part of that time. And part of that is because I'm a believer in absolutes. Gravity doesn't change, nor does the word of God. And so we taught the boys that and tried to keep them in that, cheating isn't ever right. Things like that kind of attitude. But so I would say part of it was, even though they were partly in public school and Christian school, was keeping them under a thing of absolute values always work, even when we miss them. Mm. And then just trusting. I always trust that God puts things in people's heart, and all we have to do is kind of find and inspire them in any way we can, or let them be who they're called to be when at all possible. And so they both kind of tell you who they are,
Yeah, that's really good, because they're so driven.
True.
So,
but think of part of that burnt down house. What I'm saying is not all good that drives people.
Getting up and
they had 4-H calves.
And responsibility from an early age.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I always was so amazed, like Luke just kind of going off to Harvard and making the leap from just knowing his background and where he grew up, and just always so proud of him for that. And then Peter followed suit and went to
University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also got in the political realm. Peter did, right?
Well, I don't know if he did at the University of Pennsylvania. Both the boys were actually in student council in high school too. And I think they both went to Boise State. So they already had some of that. And then Peter recently has, run for county commissioner 2 times. So I'd say Peter's really smart, and he's, as you know, a very good communicator.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So Luke went on to Harvard and then went to Manhattan, which couldn't be any further from Moran, Wyoming.
Right.
And worked in finance. Mm-hmm. And then went back to Harvard and got his master's degree.
Yes.
In finance, right? In business or something.
Yeah.
And then Pete, didn't he go to Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, he worked in Washington, D.C. Oh, man. He worked he worked in national security under President Bush.
That's right.
Yeah, so, that's where he met Lauren, his wife. So he spent, quite a few years in D.C., and like you said, in politics, basically, I shouldn't have skipped that. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and didn't he work for Dick Cheney?
Yes, he did.
When he was the vice president?
Yeah, I think he did. Maybe, I might have Cheney mixed up with Bush. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, just amazing that these two boys grew up on this little ranch in Moran and went on to do these amazing things. Yeah. And I love how you said Luke is so forward thinking. I talk to him and I'm I can't keep up. He is so. I often think it must be very frustrating for him to deal with us common folk, because his vision is unbelievable. But I also think that has a lot to do with the environment that he grew up in, watching you and Grant. Because when I worked here, I remember the things that you guys were praying for and contending for in 1998, 99, 2000 are things that are happening now.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
I thought you guys were crazy because you were praying for such big things, for impact, for favor, for finances, for money. And I grew up in a beautiful denomination that didn't always think like that. Like money was the root of all evil. And to hear you guys talk about such freedom with finances, but it's open-handed. Mm-hmm. It's like to do what God's calling us to do. It's going to take money.
Yeah.
And to see that manifest and to see that happen where you guys are at, and you guys are both so incredibly modest and humble with what goes on at the Diamond Cross Ranch is unbelievable. I mean, the celebrities, the musicians, the A-listers that come to your property and do the things that you do, and I feel like get impacted spiritually by what you guys have contended for, and the seeds that have been planted, because you have very powerful people that are running this country.
Right.
Literally, the CEOs of these billion-dollar companies, to Kanye West, to you name it, come here.
Yeah.
And you guys, and Grant's message with the horse and what he does, plants seeds and impacts people. And it's the stuff you guys were contending for 25 years ago. And it's happening.
On a prophetic word.
On a prophetic
So
word.
Grant and I have always been led by the prophetic. And anybody who doesn't believe it, I'm sorry, they're missing a big part of our joyous walk with God.
Yeah.
But we had a prophetic word that we were called to leaders in the book of Isaiah. And we will keep the Bible center. It should always back up a prophetic word.
Yes.
So just like you said, we didn't have the money, but Grant had the dream. He walked the structure of faith as being sure of what you hope for. That structure was walked out, prayed out, and the provision came. It's all a miracle to us.
Well, it started with the circus tent that
exactly.
You guys bought
our circus
my first
tent.
summer.
Yes.
And we'd scratch our heads and hook trucks up to it and tie it down with this and pull it up and it'd fall over. And that's where it kind of started.
Yes.
And now you have this incredible, beautiful indoor arena where these people's lives get changed. How many weddings are you guys doing there this summer?
Whoops. A number.
A lot.
Yes.
And it's turned into this mecca that people come to from all over.
Yes.
And you guys have built it on
faith.
On this faith.
But
journey.
provision comes with faith. It isn't always instant, but we totally, if you're just patient and if you're in the will of God, it will happen. Just don't be double-minded.
That's good. And it does take time.
Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah, some things you wait. Just things you really want, you wait for 20 years. Grant and I have been married 25 years now. It went so fast.
And look what you've built, but it didn't happen overnight.
No, it didn't happen overnight. Thankfully, it didn't happen overnight because you got to be ready to carry that vision.
It'll drown you.
Yeah, it will.
We've seen it happen, right?
Yeah, and you know the burden of just your new business now. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, and I've made a lot of money when I wasn't ready to, and it did drown me. I've lost everything.
Right, yeah.
Because I was double-minded.
Right.
I had one foot in and one foot out.
Mm-hmm. Maybe because you didn't know your purpose yet.
I didn't then. I had to go through, like we all do. We have to go through the desert.
Yes, we do.
But to your point of the house burning down and a couple of rough marriages, now you guys are oaks of righteousness.
I hope so. Thank you.
You guys are walking out Isaiah 61 in a beautiful way that has impacted so many of us. Because you guys did cowboy church for I don't know how many years in that circus tent before you built the indoor arena.
Yeah.
And as you guys kind of look at the rest of your life, you and Grant, and what you've built, here's where I know the fruit. Because we can say whatever we want about how important family is and our faith and all these things. Here's where I know that you guys have walked it out for the right reasons and done it the right way. Because your family, your kids have returned to you.
Thank you.
That's it. Because, again, you hear people say this stuff, the same things you're saying all the time. Why don't their kids want to have anything to do with them? Because behind closed doors, they're not walking this thing out.
Yeah.
And you're not just saying it. You have led your sons by example. And Grant, I love the back end of the story with Grant and your sons are, now I see what they do for him. out of
Yeah.
honor, respect, and love
Yeah.
that has to be earned.
Yeah.
And
That's
Grant
right.
wrote it out when they didn't want anything to do with him.
Yes, he did.
And they didn't want to look at him or talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see how much both of them boys honor him.
Yes,
And that's powerful.
I know.
And that wasn't easy for Grant, and it wasn't easy for them.
No,
But now to see Peter's moved home,
that's right.
lives in the house he grew up in,
That's for sure.
is raising his family there.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially they're starting to take over
Yeah, the business.
business.
Yes.
because of how you guys have stewarded their hearts and their journeys and supported them. That's the fruit, right?
Absolutely.
As a parent, what's better?
Yeah, nothing. Money doesn't take the place of relationship.
And they both love the Lord.
Yeah, we're grateful. Very grateful.
You did it.
Well, God did it.
Well, you said yes.
Yeah, we said yes.
You had to partner with him
Yeah, absolutely.
to do it.
Yeah,
Because we have free will. You could
Mhm.
have said no,
yeah,
but you did the hard work. You did the hard things.
Yeah,
You did the inner
thankfully.
work.
yeah, we did. And thankfully, we didn't quit. I think a part of the journey is just don't quit.
That's what I think too, because Mary and I could have quit
You could have.
times. And
Yeah.
you and Grant were there for us at the beginning of the end before we moved away.
Yeah, I remember that.
You guys have just been spiritual parents to me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And to get to come, so right now as we're recording this is how redemptive this journey's been. My journey started here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of heartache in between has happened to me in Jackson. I've spent a lot of time in jail in this county. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had my heart broke here. My wife left me when I was up here. And for that to come full circle, to your point of not giving up, my
Yeah.
wife and I didn't give up. And because of my story, which all the impactful things in my life happened in this valley pretty much because I got married here.
That's right.
I
you
got
did.
engaged here.
Yes.
Like a lot of hard things, a lot of good things.
Mm-hmm.
But to do what we're doing this weekend, to be on your family's property and have men flying in from all over the country to come here to be seen and heard and to be a part of in their journey of their redemption story. How cool that we get to do this here
Absolutely.
on the land that your families fought to keep.
Yeah. Well, we're as grateful as you are, Jeremy, for people like you. That's why God gives us things. He lets us steward. I say we steward the land. We steward our time, but we also steward people. And that's a true gift from the Lord.
It really is.
Yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be, to leave for your kids and your grandkids?
I would say it would be that they would just walk with the Lord all the days of their life. You know, not in a narrow-minded religious way, but in a living relationship.
Me too. That's it, right?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
What's more beautiful than that? And to get
Nothing.
to see them and again,
Yeah.
just to see what they're doing with this property and how they're stewarding it.
Yeah.
It's different. It's not cows.
Not enough.
Not enough. Some.
But
Just how smart and
Mhm.
they're going to keep this. And the cool thing is because of what you fought for spiritually and emotionally and all the hard work you've done, your grandkids and great-grandkids are going to get to enjoy and experience what you fought for.
I believe it.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
You're amazing. I love you.
I love you, Jeremy. We'll love you and Mary forever.
And I'm so...
And we'll spend forever together.
Yes, we will.
Yes.
Thank you so much for jumping on here today and getting out of your comfort zone. I know you weren't looking forward to this, but I'm just really grateful for you and for you and Grant and
Well, thank you, Jeremy.
always being there for me.
Well, it's a two-way street. Totally true, two-way.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.